Chicago had a way of turning brutal in December, the kind of cold that didn't just bite, but sank its teeth deep into bone and refused to let go. Nathan Cole had lived through 36 winters in this city, and he thought he understood what the wind could do to a man standing still. But nothing in those years had prepared him for the paralysis that gripped him, now rooted to the sidewalk outside Rosewood Bistro, while snowflakes accumulated on his shoulders like the weight of every mistake he'd ever made. The clock tower 3 blocks down struck 7. He'd been standing here for 11 minutes already, watching his breath form clouds that dispersed into the night like prayers nobody was listening to. Through the restaurant's frost-edged windows, he could see the warm, amber glow of candles, the silhouettes of couples leaning close over white tablecloths, the gentle sway of a Christmas tree decorated with what looked like 1,000 tiny lights. It was beautiful in there. It was terrifying. 3 years, 1,095 days since he'd sat across from a woman with anything resembling romantic intent. The last time had been Rachel, always Rachel, in their small kitchen on the morning of that final Christmas Eve when she'd kissed him goodbye and promised to be home before midnight. She'd been wearing the green sweater Lily picked out for her birthday, the one that brought out the honey tones in her brown eyes. She'd smelled like vanilla and coffee and the particular sweetness that was simply her. And he'd let her walk out the door because he was distracted, because Lily was crying about wanting to open just one present early, because he thought there would be infinite mornings just like that one stretching out ahead of them. There weren't. Inside his coat pocket, Nathan's fingers found the thin chain that held Rachel's wedding ring. He'd taken it off her finger at the funeral home, unable to let them bury it with her, unable to wear it himself because it belonged to her hand and her hand alone. Now it lived against his chest, a cold circle of platinum that warmed only from his body heat, never from hers. He touched it whenever he needed to remember why he'd chosen to live inside a shell these past 3 years, why he'd turned down every well-meaning attempt by friends to set him up, why he'd convinced himself that what he'd had with Rachel was a once-in-a-lifetime miracle that would never repeat. But then there was Lily. This morning his daughter had appeared in the kitchen doorway while he was pretending to read the newspaper, her golden hair still tangled from sleep, her blue eyes enormous and solemn in that way that always made his chest ache. She'd been clutching Cinnamon, the stuffed bear that had been Rachel's last gift to her, and she'd walked right up to him and placed one small hand on his knee. "Daddy, are you really going to meet someone special tonight?" He'd wanted to lie, wanted to tell her it was just a dinner with a friend, nothing important, nothing that could possibly change the careful equilibrium of their little two-person universe. But Lily had a way of looking at him that made lying feel like the worst kind of betrayal. "I'm going to try, sweetheart. Promise." And God help him, he'd promised. He'd looked into those eyes that were so much like her mother's and nodded, and Lily had smiled with such pure, uncomplicated hope that he'd almost wept right there over his cold coffee. Now he stood outside this restaurant where a woman named Evelyn Harper was supposedly waiting for him, and he understood with sudden clarity that he had no idea how to do this anymore. The rituals of dating, the small talk, and careful revelations, the dance of two people trying to determine if they could stand each other's company for more than an hour. All of it felt like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. He was 36 years old, with calloused hands and prematurely gray temples, and a daughter waiting at home who needed him to be brave, and he couldn't even make himself walk through a door. A gust of wind drove snow into his face, sharp as needles. Nathan blinked it away and noticed the Christmas song drifting through the restaurant's briefly open door as a couple exited arm in arm, laughing about something. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," Rachel's favorite. Of course it was. The universe had a sense of humor that bordered on cruelty sometimes. He could leave. Right now, this second, he could turn around and walk back to the L station and ride home and tell Lily that the lady never showed up. She was 7 years old. She wouldn't ask follow-up questions. She'd just nod and say, "Maybe next time, Daddy," and that would be the end of it, and he could keep living in his comfortable gray existence where nothing ever changed and nothing ever hurt worse than it already did. But Lily would know. She always knew. And she'd look at him with those blue eyes and see right through whatever flimsy excuse he offered, and she wouldn't say anything, but he'd see the disappointment settling into her small shoulders. He'd see her retreat a little further into conversations with her stuffed bear, into the world inside her head, where her mother still lived and Daddy was still whole. Nathan took a breath that hurt going down. Then another. Then he put his hand on the brass door handle, feeling the cold metal even through his worn leather gloves, and he pushed. The warmth hit him like a wave, carrying with it the scent of rosemary and roasted meat and expensive wine. The hostess, a young woman with an earpiece and a tablet, looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly as she took in his appearance. He knew what she was seeing, the jacket that had been nice 10 years ago, but now showed its age at the elbows. The boots that were practical for Chicago winters, but wouldn't pass muster in a place like this. The general air of a man who fixed other people's problems for a living and had stopped caring about his own. Sir, welcome to Rosewood. Do you have a reservation? I'm meeting someone, Evelyn Harper. The hostess's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly, and Nathan felt the familiar flush of inadequacy creep up his neck. He knew what she was thinking. What would a woman who warranted that reaction be doing with someone like him? Of course, right this way. She led him through the restaurant, past tables where people in beautiful clothes were having beautiful conversations about their beautiful lives, past a massive fireplace where actual logs burned and crackled, past a Christmas tree that probably cost more than he earned in a month. And there at a corner table by the window that looked out over Michigan Avenue sat the woman he was here to meet. Margaret Chen had described her, but the description hadn't done justice to the reality. Evelyn Harper was the kind of beautiful that belonged in magazines, in boardrooms, in places where Nathan Cole would never be invited. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, catching the candlelight like spun gold. Her posture was perfect, spine-straight shoulders, back the posture of someone who had learned early that the world was watching and judging. She wore something dark and expensive that looked effortlessly elegant, and around her throat, catching the light, was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant he couldn't quite make out from this distance. She was also, he realized as he got closer, barely touching her wine. The glass sat before her like a prop, something to hold, something to look at instead of the door. And when she glanced at her watch, checking the time for what was clearly not the first time that evening, he saw something in her expression that he recognized intimately. She didn't want to be here either. Somehow that made it easier to approach. Two reluctant participants in a ritual, neither of them believed in just trying to get through the evening without causing too much damage. Evelyn? She looked up, and for a split second her gray-blue eyes widened in what might have been surprise or disappointment, he couldn't tell which. Then the mask came down smooth and professional, and she was standing and extending her hand with the precise movements of someone who shook hands for a living. You must be Nathan. Please sit down. Her handshake was firm but brief, releasing him almost before he'd finished grasping her palm. Nathan pulled out his chair and sat, immediately bumping the table leg with his knee and sending her untouched wine glass wobbling. He lunged to steady it, and in the process knocked over the small vase of roses in the center of the table. Water spread across the white tablecloth like a dark accusation. I'm so sorry. God, I'm sorry. He was already grabbing his napkin, dabbing at the spill, watching in horror as the romantic setup of their table transformed into evidence of his incompetence. I should have warned you, I'm basically a walking disaster in fancy places. Evelyn reached for her own napkin with a sigh that she didn't quite manage to suppress. It's fine, it's just water. But it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. Nathan could feel the evening calcifying around them, hardening into the shape of a story they'd both tell later. Remember that blind date I went on? The guy knocked over everything within 5 seconds of sitting down. He'd be the punchline. He was always the punchline in places like this. A waiter appeared, silently efficient, whisking away the wet tablecloth and replacing it with a fresh one, righting the vase, refilling the small disaster zone with new roses and new water, as if Nathan's clumsiness could be erased with enough staff and enough linen. When he left the table, looked perfect again. Nathan did not feel perfect. He felt like he'd already failed whatever test this evening represented. So, Evelyn folded her hands on the table, her rings catching the candlelight. Margaret tells me you're in the repair business. Yeah, I fix things. Electrical, plumbing, appliances, whatever people need. Nathan tried to find some way to make it sound more impressive and came up empty. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on. That's practical. The word landed between them with a thud. Practical. The kind of thing you called a sensible pair of shoes. Not exciting, not interesting, just practical. And you're in marketing, right? Nathan grasped for the thread of information Margaret had given him. Something about running campaigns. I'm a senior marketing director at Morrison and Associates. Evelyn's voice shifted into what he recognized as her professional register, crisp and competent. We handle integrated communications for Fortune 500 companies. That sounds... Nathan searched for a word that wouldn't make him sound like the undereducated handyman he suddenly felt like. Demanding, Barrington. It has its moments. Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable as a wool sweater in summer. Nathan watched Evelyn trace the rim of her wine glass with one manicured finger. Still not drinking, still not relaxing. In the candlelight, he could see the faint lines of tension around her mouth, the way her jaw held itself just slightly too tight. The restaurant's nice, he offered, desperate to fill the void. I've never been here before. Have you? A few times for work events. Of course. Of course she came here for work events, probably with clients who wore suits that cost more than his car, probably discussing million-dollar campaigns over appetizers that he couldn't pronounce. What was he even doing here? The waiter returned to take their orders. Nathan had barely glanced at the menu, but he picked the first pasta dish he saw because at least he knew what that was. Evelyn ordered a salad, and the waiter nodded with the kind of deference that suggested she could have ordered a plate of gravel, and he would have treated it with the same reverence. When they were alone again, Nathan tried once more. So Margaret said you two have worked together for a while. 5 years, she's one of the good ones. Her brother Thomas is a client of mine. I renovated his bathroom last summer. Nathan immediately regretted bringing up bathroom renovation as dinner conversation. Brilliant, very sophisticated. How nice. Evelyn's tone suggested she was running out of polite responses. The silence returned thicker this time. Nathan found himself staring at the condensation forming on his water glass, watching the drops slowly make their way down the side, wishing he could melt through the floor the same way. This was a mistake. Coming here, agreeing to this date, thinking he could somehow re-enter the world of normal human interaction after 3 years of voluntary isolation. He'd been foolish to hope, and now he was paying the price, trapped at a table with a woman who clearly had better things to do and better people to do them with. He was about to make some excuse about needing to check on Lily, about leaving early, about abandoning this sinking ship before it dragged them both down, when something shifted in Evelyn's expression. Her hand had moved to her throat, fingers closing around the pendant he'd noticed earlier. Up close, he could see now what it was, a tiny silver snowflake, delicate and intricate, catching the light with each small movement. That's beautiful, he heard himself say. The necklace. Evelyn's hand froze, and for a moment, something cracked open in her face. Not much, just the slightest fissure in the composure she wore like armor, but Nathan saw it. Thank you. Is it an heirloom? It looks old. The fissure widened. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the snowflake, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its professional polish. It was my sister's. Was. Nathan heard the past tense like a bell tolling. I'm sorry. The words came automatically, the same words he'd heard 1,000 times after Rachel died, words that meant nothing and everything. Is she 10 years now? Evelyn's jaw worked. Car accident. December. Nathan felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than sympathy. My wife died 3 years ago, also a car accident. Christmas Eve. The words hung between them, changing the shape of everything. Evelyn's hand fell away from the necklace, and for the first time she looked at him as if she were actually seeing him, not just evaluating his suitability as a dinner companion. I'm sorry, she said, and unlike the polite platitudes she'd offered earlier, this sounded real. Her name was Rachel. She was a nurse. She was... Nathan had to stop the familiar grief rising in his throat like tidewater. She was working at Christmas Eve. She always worked holidays because she said the patients needed someone who really cared, and she was driving home, and there was black ice, and he couldn't finish. He'd told the story so many times in the months after to police and insurance adjusters and well-meaning friends, and somehow it never got easier. The words still cut on the way out. You don't have to explain. Evelyn's voice was gentler now. I understand. Do you have any other family? Nathan asked, partly to redirect the conversation, partly because he genuinely wanted to know. Not really. Our parents divorced when I was 12. My mother lives in Florida with her new husband. My father, she made a small gesture, dismissive and final. We don't speak. So Sophie was everything. Evelyn's eyes shone briefly before she blinked the moisture away. She was 4 years younger than me, the sweetest person you'd ever meet. She was in college studying art history, she wanted to work in museums, and she was driving home for Christmas break when another pause, another controlled breath. She loved winter. She used to say that every snowflake was a wish from an angel. Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. What did you say? Evelyn frowned at his sudden intensity. About the snowflakes, it was just something she believed. She was like that, always finding magic in ordinary things. She bought me this necklace at a street fair years ago. She said I needed something to remind me to look up once in a while to see the beauty in things. And then when she died, I found it in her jewelry box. She'd taken it back without telling me, started wearing it herself. So now she touched the pendant again and Nathan understood. He had Rachel's ring against his chest for the same reason. My wife used to say the same thing. His voice came out strange, strangled. About snowflakes being wishes. That's why she started making paper snowflakes with Lily every Christmas. She said we were catching wishes and hanging them in our windows. Evelyn stared at him. That's a strange coincidence. Yeah. Nathan shook his head slowly. Yeah, it is. The air between them had shifted again, charged now with something neither of them could name. Two strangers in a restaurant, both marked by losses that had struck at the same time of year, both carrying talismans of the people they'd lost, and now this bizarre echo of a shared belief that neither of them had expected to find in the other. Evelyn opened her mouth to say something, but before she could speak, her composure suddenly crumbled. She pressed her napkin to her lips and stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need a moment. Excuse me. She walked away, not quite running, but moving too fast for dignity, and Nathan watched her disappear toward the back of the restaurant where the restrooms waited. He wanted to follow, wanted to make sure she was all right, but he knew that sometimes people needed to fall apart in private. He'd spent enough nights locked in the bathroom after Lily went to sleep to understand that. Their food arrived while she was gone. The waiter set down the plates with professional neutrality, as if women fleeing mid-conversation was a perfectly normal occurrence at Rosewood Bistro. Nathan stared at his pasta and felt no hunger at all, only a hollow ache that had nothing to do with his stomach. He'd hurt her somehow. By bringing up Rachel, by noticing the connection between Sophie's belief and his wife's, by dragging them both into waters that were too deep for a first date, or any date. He should have stuck to safe topics. Weather, work, the Cubs' chances next season, not dead sisters and snowflake wishes, and the various ways grief could hollow out a human being. In the bathroom, Evelyn gripped the marble countertop and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her mascara had held, thank God, but her eyes were red and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd thought she was ready for this. Margaret had been so persistent, so convinced that 3 years was long enough, that Evelyn was wasting her life behind her office walls and her carefully constructed routines, and she'd finally caved just to get her friend to stop asking. But this man, this Nathan Cole with his sad eyes and his calloused hands and his dead wife, he'd walked into her carefully defended heart like he had a map to all her weak points. The way he talked about Rachel with such naked love and loss. The way he'd noticed her necklace, really noticed it, not just commented on it as a fashion accessory. The way he'd repeated Sophie's words as if they were his own, as if somehow his wife and her sister had known the same secret about the universe. It was too much. It was far too much for a Tuesday evening in December, for a blind date she'd never wanted to be on in the first place. Evelyn turned on the cold water and let it run over her wrists, a trick she'd learned in the early days after Sophie's death, when panic attacks came without warning. The shock of the cold helped grounding her in her body, pulling her back from the edge of wherever her emotions were trying to drag her. She looked at the woman in the mirror, 34 years old, successful by any measure the world cared about, senior director at a top firm, corner office, six-figure salary, and completely, utterly alone. 3 years ago, she'd been engaged. Marcus Webb, junior partner at a prestigious law firm, exactly the kind of man her colleagues envied. They dated for 2 years, planned their wedding for 14 months, assembled a guest list of 300 people who would witness their perfect union. And then the night before the ceremony in the hotel suite where she was supposed to wake up as a bride, Marcus had sat on the edge of the bed and delivered the truth like a surgeon removing a tumor. He was in love with Diane, her best friend since college, her maid of honor, the woman who'd helped her pick out her wedding dress and plan her bachelorette party. They'd been sleeping together for months. He couldn't marry Evelyn with that lie between them. He was sorry, so sorry, but he thought she deserved to know. Evelyn had called off the wedding at 11 o'clock at night. She'd made all the phone calls herself, her voice steady and mechanical, informing caterers and florists and 300 guests that there would be no ceremony. She'd returned the dress, she'd moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Marcus. She'd done everything right, everything proper, and then she'd built walls around her heart so high and so thick that no one would ever get close enough to hurt her again. Marcus and Diane were married now. She'd heard through mutual friends. They had a baby on the way. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed. The cold water was numbing her wrists, but it was working. The panic was receding, replaced by the familiar emptiness that she'd learned to call normal. She couldn't stay in this bathroom forever. The man at the table, Nathan, he was probably wondering if she'd climbed out a window. She needed to go back, finish the meal, make polite excuses about an early meeting, and get the hell out of here before she did something stupid like cry in front of a stranger. But when she thought about his face, about the way his voice had broken when he talked about his wife, she felt something crack inside her again. He understood, and that was the terrifying thing. He actually understood what it felt like to lose the person who made the world make sense. No one had understood since Sophie. Not Marcus, who treated her grief as an inconvenience to be managed. Not her mother, who'd suggested therapy like it was a cure-all and then gone back to her new life in Florida. Not anyone. Evelyn dried her hands, checked her reflection one more time, and walked back out into the restaurant. Nathan looked up when she returned, his expression a mixture of concern and embarrassment. "I'm sorry if I said something wrong. I didn't mean to." "You didn't." Evelyn sat down, and this time she didn't reach for the wine. "I'm just not very good at this anymore. Talking about real things with people. That makes two of us." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not attraction, not exactly, though Nathan was aware that even disheveled and red-eyed Evelyn Harper was the most beautiful woman he'd seen in years. It was more like recognition. Two people who had been beaten down by life finding each other in an unlikely place, both too tired to pretend. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said. "Why did you agree to this tonight, I mean? You obviously didn't want to come." Evelyn laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Is it that obvious?" "Takes one to know one. I almost turned around 3 times on my way here." Margaret wouldn't stop asking. Evelyn picked up her fork and pushed at her untouched salad. "She's been trying to set me up for 2 years. I finally ran out of excuses." "Same. Well, not Margaret, but my friend Thomas, her brother. He said his sister knew someone perfect for me. I said no about 50 times until he made me promise I'd try at least once. And now we're both here trying. Pretty much failing, but trying." Evelyn's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. "The bar for failure might be lower than you think. I've been on worse first dates." "Really? Because knocking over the water and making you cry seems like a pretty low point." "I once had a date who spent the entire evening talking about his ex-wife, in detail, including their sex life." Nathan winced. "Okay, that's worse." "And there was the one who brought his mother. His mother liked to the restaurant. She sat at the next table and kept sending over suggestions about what I should order. Apparently, I was too thin and needed more protein." Nathan found himself laughing, and the sound surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed with someone other than Lily. So, compared to that, spilling water and sharing dead spouse stories is what a solid C minus, at least a B. Evelyn's smile widened slightly. "You haven't mentioned your ex's intimate details or brought a relative." "The night is young." It was a joke, small and silly, but it broke something loose between them. The tension that had been suffocating the evening began to dissipate, replaced by something lighter. Not ease, not yet, but the possibility of it. They started talking. Real talking, the kind that meandered and doubled back and found unexpected connections. Evelyn told him about Sophie, about the sister who had been her best friend, and her anchor who had believed in fairies until she was 12, and in true love until the day she died. Nathan told her about Rachel, about the nurse who'd mocked his complaining when he came into the ER with a broken rib, and then agreed to have coffee with him when he asked, despite hospital rules, despite every sensible reason to say no. They talked about grief, about the way it didn't move in stages, the way the books promised. but circled back like a tide, retreating and returning when you least expected. They talked about the people who meant well, but said the wrong things, about the platitudes that made you want to scream, about the strange guilt of laughing at something months after a loss, as if enjoying a single moment was a betrayal of the person who was gone. And they talked about Lily. She's the only reason I'm still standing, honestly. Nathan's voice softened the way it always did when he spoke of his daughter. After Rachel died, I wanted to disappear. Not die exactly, but just stop. Stop feeling, stop trying, stop existing as anything more than a body going through motions. But Lily needed me. She was 4 years old and her mother was gone and I was all she had. So I got up every day, even when I couldn't breathe, and I made her breakfast and walked her to school and pretended I was okay until eventually some small part of me actually was. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her salad forgotten. She sounds special. She is. Nathan struggled for words that could encompass his daughter. She sees things. I don't know how to explain it. She looks at people and just knows things about them. Her teacher says she's exceptionally perceptive. I say she's got her mother's heart in some kind of sixth sense that I don't understand at all. Where is she now? Here, actually. The restaurant has a kids area with supervision. I didn't want to leave her with a babysitter she didn't know, and she was so excited about me going on a date that she begged to come. So she's over there somewhere, probably drawing pictures and charming the staff into giving her extra cookies. Evelyn glanced toward the back of the restaurant where a section had been set up with child-sized tables and art supplies. She couldn't see anyone from here, but she felt something tug at her chest. A 7-year-old girl who had lost her mother and still believed enough in happiness to want her father to find it again. She wanted you to come tonight. She practically pushed me out the door. Nathan's smile was tender and sad at once. She told me that Mom would want me to be happy. She's 7 and she's already trying to take care of me. It should be the other way around. She sounds like Sophie. The words slipped out before Evelyn could stop them. Sophie was always the one taking care of everyone else. She'd give you the shirt off her back and then apologize for it being wrinkled. Do you miss her still? Sorry, stupid question. Of course you do. Every day. Evelyn's hand found the snowflake necklace, again an unconscious habit. But it's different now than it was at first. In the beginning, it was like being on fire all the time. Now it's more like a permanent bruise. You learn to work around it, but it never quite heals. Nathan nodded. That's exactly it. A permanent bruise. Their food had gone cold, but neither of them had noticed. They'd stopped looking around the restaurant, stopped being aware of the other diners, or the music, or the falling snow outside. They were in their own small world, built from shared loss and unexpected understanding. It was Evelyn who first noticed something had changed in the atmosphere of the restaurant. A murmur was spreading through the other tables, people looking at their phones, talking to each other with expressions of concern. Through the tall windows, she could see that the gentle snowfall from earlier had transformed into something more serious. The flakes were thick and driving now, whipping sideways in a wind that rattled the glass. That doesn't look good, she said. Nathan turned to look and felt his stomach drop. He'd checked the weather before leaving home, a habit ingrained from years of outdoor work, and there had been nothing about this. Just regular winter precipitation. The meteorologist had said nothing to worry about. But what he was seeing through the window wasn't regular anything. It was the leading edge of something serious. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. He pulled it out and saw the emergency alerts stacking up on a screen. Winter storm warning, all public transit suspended. Travel not advised. Stay indoors until further notice. We might have a problem. Across the restaurant, the manager was stepping forward, his hands raised to get everyone's attention. His voice was calm but carried the undertone of someone managing a crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. We've just received word from the city that a major storm system has moved in faster than predicted. Streets are being closed and public transportation has been suspended. We're asking everyone to remain inside the restaurant until conditions improve. Rosewood will be serving as an emergency shelter for the duration. We'll do everything we can to make you comfortable. But a ripple of concerned conversation spread through the room. Nathan stood immediately, his chair scraping back. Lily, I need to get to Lily. He was moving before he finished speaking, weaving between tables toward the kids' area at the back of the restaurant. Evelyn followed without thinking, caught up in his urgency. She didn't know this child had only heard about her in the past hour, but something in Nathan's fear transmitted itself to her, making the little girl feel suddenly terribly important. The kids' area was a cheerful space with low tables, bins of crayons, and walls painted with cartoon animals. A young woman in a rosewood uniform was overseeing a handful of children, most of whom seemed unconcerned by the weather outside. They were drawing and playing, wrapped up in the oblivious bubble of childhood. Nathan scanned the room, his heart pounding. There in the corner by the window was a small figure with golden hair pressing her face against the glass and staring out at the storm. Lily. The girl turned at his voice, and Evelyn got her first real look at Nathan's daughter. She was small for 7, with delicate features and eyes that were startlingly blue, almost too large for her face. She was clutching a worn teddy bear that had clearly been loved hard for years, and when she saw her father, her expression shifted from fascination with the storm to careful assessment of his emotional state. "Hi, Daddy." The snow got really big. Nathan crossed to her and knelt, pulling her into a hug that seemed to be as much for his own reassurance as hers. "Yeah, baby, it did. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but the lady said we can't leave. Is that true?" "For now, but it's going to be okay. We'll just wait here until the storm passes." Lily nodded, accepting this with the equanimity of a child who trusted her father completely. Then her eyes moved past Nathan's shoulder to the woman standing behind him. Evelyn felt the full force of that gaze and understood immediately what Nathan had meant about his daughter seeing things. Those blue eyes were ancient somehow, carrying a weight of understanding that shouldn't have been possible in someone so young. "You're the lady Daddy had dinner with." It wasn't a question. Evelyn nodded. "I'm Lily. This is Cinnamon." She held up the bear. "He's my best friend. Mom gave him to me. He's very handsome." Evelyn found herself kneeling too, bringing herself down to Lily's eye level. "I'm Evelyn." Lily studied her for a long moment, her head tilted slightly to one side. "Your necklace is pretty. It's a snowflake." "Yes, it is. Mom likes snowflakes too. She said every snowflake is a wish from an angel." Evelyn felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Nathan had mentioned this earlier, the strange coincidence, but hearing it from the child's mouth made it somehow more real, more impossible. "My sister used to say the same thing." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Really? She loved the snow. She said it was magic." Something passed over Lily's face, a flash of recognition that was too complex for Evelyn to interpret. The girl looked at her father, then back at Evelyn, and a small smile curved her lips. "Daddy." Her voice was suddenly intense, pitched low, as if sharing a secret. "Daddy, look at her." Nathan glanced between his daughter and Evelyn, confused. "What am I looking at, sweetheart?" "She's sad like you. I can see it." Lily reached out and took Evelyn's hand, the gesture sudden and startling. "But she's good. I can tell. She cares about things." "Lily, you shouldn't." But Lily wasn't listening to her father. She was staring at Evelyn with those two old eyes, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a certainty that made both adults freeze. "Daddy, she's the one." The words dropped into the space between them like stones into still water. Nathan's face cycled through a series of emotions, embarrassment and shock, and something that might have been hope before settling into careful blankness. "Lily, honey, you can't say things like that. We just met. It's not—" "I know." Lily's voice was patient, as if she were explaining something obvious to a slow student. "But I can tell. The way I could tell that Mrs. Patterson at school was sad before anyone knew her husband was sick. The way I knew Cinnamon was special before Mom even gave him to me." She looked at Evelyn again, her grip on the woman's hand tightening. "You're like us. You lost someone too. And you're scared like Daddy. But you don't have to be scared." Evelyn found she couldn't speak. This child, this small creature, who had lived through loss that would break most adults, was looking at her with compassion and acceptance that she hadn't encountered since Sophie's death. It was too much. It was not nearly enough. "Lily," Nathan's voice was strained. "We need to apologize to Evelyn for being too personal." "No." Evelyn surprised herself with the word. "No, don't apologize. She had to stop, had to swallow past the tightness in her throat. "She's remarkable." Lily beamed, and the transformation was stunning. Her whole face lit up, and suddenly she wasn't an old soul in a child's body, but just a little girl who'd been told she was special. I like you, Lily announced. Do you want to make snowflakes with us later? Daddy's not very good at cutting them, but I can teach you. Mom taught me, and I remember all the steps. Evelyn looked at Nathan, who seemed caught between mortification and wonder. I would love that, she heard herself say. If it's okay with your dad. It's okay, Lily answered for him with the supreme confidence of a child who had never been told she wasn't in charge. Daddy wants you to stay. He just doesn't know how to say it. Nathan covered his face with his hands. Lily, please. But when he lowered his hands, Evelyn saw that he was smiling. It was a small, embarrassed, helpless smile, but it was the first genuine one she'd seen from him all evening. My daughter has apparently decided to become a matchmaker. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Evelyn stood and Lily stood with her still holding her hand. She's honest. That's more than most adults can manage. She's too honest. She once told our mailman he looked like a sad turtle. Lily nodded solemnly. He did, but he got a new hat, and now he looks happier. Evelyn laughed, and the sound startled her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed at anything that wasn't a client joke or a polite social response. This was different. This was real. The three of them made their way back toward the main dining room, where the restaurant staff was rearranging furniture to accommodate the new reality of a long night. Tables were being pushed together to create larger seating areas. Blankets were appearing from somewhere, probably the offices in the back. The bar was doing brisk business as patrons settled in for an unexpected evening. Through the tall windows, the storm raged on. Michigan Avenue had disappeared, entirely replaced by a wall of white. The few cars that had been brave enough to still be out were now invisible, buried, or stranded, or both. Chicago had been erased, replaced by something primal and elemental. Nathan found a booth in the corner far from the main activity, and the three of them settled in. Lily immediately began organizing the art supplies she'd brought from the kids' area, spreading paper and safety scissors across the table, with the focus of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Okay, she announced. First you fold the paper like this. Daddy, pay attention. You always forget this part. Nathan rolled his eyes but leaned in obediently. Evelyn watched as Lily walked them through the process, her small hands surprisingly deft as she demonstrated each fold and cut. There was something ceremonial about it, something sacred. This was the ritual her mother had taught her, the last physical connection to the woman who had made her. Mom said you have to think about something you wish for and while you cut. Lily explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. That's what makes it work. The snowflake holds your wish. What do you wish for? Evelyn asked. Lily considered the question with great seriousness. I wish for Daddy to be happy. I wish for snow days off from school. I wish for a puppy, but Daddy says maybe next year. She paused and her voice got even quieter. I wish I could see Mom again, just for one day, just to tell her about everything she's missing. Nathan's hand stilled on his paper. Evelyn saw him swallow hard, saw the way he blinked too fast, and she understood that this was how grief worked when you had a child. You couldn't fall apart completely because someone was watching, learning, depending on you to show them how to survive. I think your mom knows, Evelyn said softly. I think she sees everything you do. Lily looked up at her with those ancient eyes. That's what Daddy says. Do you think it's true? Evelyn touched the snowflake at her throat. I have to believe it is. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? They cut their snowflakes in companionable silence, the sound of scissors and folding paper, mixing with the howl of the wind outside. When they unfolded them, Lily clapped her hands in delight. Look, look, Evelyn's is almost perfect. See, Daddy, she's way better than you. Nathan held up his creation, which was lopsided and had several accidental holes in the wrong places. I'm a man of many talents. Paper cutting is not among them. It has character, Evelyn offered. It has holes in weird places. Lily was already gathering up their creations. We should hang them in the window so everyone can see. Mom always said that snowflakes in windows are like little beacons calling in good luck. Nathan looked uncertain. Sweetheart, I don't know if the restaurant would want us decorating their windows. But Lily was already approaching the manager, her snowflakes clutched in her hands, her expression earnest and determined. Nathan watched in helpless amazement as his daughter engaged the harried man in conversation, gesturing toward the windows, pointing at her creations. Within 2 minutes, the manager was smiling, and within a minute he was helping Lily tape snowflakes to the frost-edged glass. "She's something else," Evelyn said, watching. "She saved me." Nathan's voice was quiet. "When Rachel died, I didn't know how to keep going. But every morning Lily would come into my room and ask me what we were going to do that day. And I couldn't tell her that I didn't want to do anything, that I wanted to pull the covers over my head and never come out. So I got up, I made breakfast, I took her to school. I built a life around her because she needed one, and somewhere along the way, I started needing it too." "That's beautiful. That's survival." Nathan looked at her. "You know what it's like. You must have had something that kept you going after Sophie." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Work mostly. I threw myself into my career because it was the only place where grief wasn't relevant. Numbers and campaigns and client meetings, they don't care if you're broken inside. They just need results. So I gave them results, and eventually I got promoted, and then promoted again, and now I'm a senior director at a top firm, and I go home every night to an empty apartment and wonder what any of it was for." "Do you still wonder?" "Not tonight." The admission surprised her as much as it surprised him. "Tonight, sitting here with you and your daughter making paper snowflakes in a snowstorm, it's the most human I've felt in years." Nathan reached out and touched her hand, just briefly, just enough to make contact. "Me too." Lily had returned triumphant from her window decorating mission, trailing the restaurant manager behind her like a defeated general. "Mr. Roberts says we can put snowflakes on all the windows if we want. He says it makes the restaurant look festive." Mr. Robert, whose name tag actually read Roberto, but who apparently hadn't had the heart to correct a 7-year-old, nodded wearily. "Your daughter is very persuasive. She told me that snowflakes in windows bring good luck during storms. I'm not sure if that's true, but at this point we could use all the luck we can get." Nathan shook his head in amazement. "Lily, you can't just—" "It's fine, really." Roberto held up a hand. "It gives the kids something to do. And honestly, it's cheering up the other guests. We're all stuck here anyway. Might as well make it pleasant." He moved off to deal with another situation, and Lily slid back into the booth with a satisfied expression. "See, Daddy? I told you it would be okay." "You're going to run the world someday," Evelyn said, "or at least a very successful negotiation firm." Lily considered this. "I want to be a veterinarian or an astronaut, or maybe someone who makes movies about animals in space. All excellent career paths." The hours slipped by in a way that Nathan hadn't experienced in years. They made more snowflakes. They ate dessert that the kitchen sent out as a goodwill gesture for the stranded guests. They talked and laughed and watched the storm rage beyond the windows, where their paper creations now hung small, defiant gestures against the fury of nature. At some point during the evening, the front door of the restaurant burst open, admitting a gust of freezing wind and a flurry of snow that scattered across the polished floor. A family stumbled in from outside, a father carrying a toddler and a mother dragging 2 suitcases, all of them covered in white and shaking from the cold. Roberto rushed to help them, and several staff members appeared with blankets and hot drinks. Lily watched the commotion with wide eyes, pressing her face against the booth's window to see better. The toddler was crying a thin wail that cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant, and the mother looked close to tears herself. "Daddy, they look really cold." "They'll be okay now. They're inside where it's warm." But Lily was already sliding out of the booth, clutching one of her paper snowflakes. Before Nathan could stop her, she was walking toward the family, her small figure determined. "Lily, wait." Nathan stood to follow, but Evelyn caught his arm. "Let her go. I think she knows what she's doing." They watched as Lily approached the crying toddler, a little boy no older than 2, and held out her snowflake. The child's wails stuttered, then stopped, his attention caught by the paper creation. Lily said something they couldn't hear, and the boy reached out to take the snowflake, turning it over in his chubby hands with fascination. The mother looked down at Lily with an expression of grateful surprise. She knelt to speak to the girl, and Lily pointed back toward Nathan and Evelyn, then toward the windows covered with paper snowflakes. A moment later, she was leading the whole family toward the booth. "Daddy, this is Henry. He's 2, and his mommy and daddy are Jennifer and Michael. They got stuck in the snow trying to get to the airport. I told them they could make snowflakes with us." Nathan exchanged a helpless look with the other father, who shrugged with the resigned acceptance of a parent who had learned to go along with children's social engineering. I'm sorry, Jennifer said, her voice still shaky from the cold. She just came up to us and, don't apologize. Nathan stood and offered his hand. I'm Nathan, this is Evelyn, and apparently my daughter has decided to adopt your family for the evening. What followed was the kind of chaos that only happens when you put a 7-year-old in charge of social arrangements. Lily organized everyone around the table, distributed paper and scissors, and began instructing the newcomers in the sacred art of snowflake creation with the seriousness of a master teaching apprentices. Henry the toddler was given the important job of holding the finished snowflakes and had to be repeatedly discouraged from eating them. Through it all, Nathan watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and wonder. This was Rachel's legacy, he realized, not just in Lily's face or her laugh, but in her instinct to reach out to people who were hurting, to include the excluded, to turn strangers into friends with nothing more than paper and scissors and an open heart. Evelyn must have seen something in his expression because she leaned close and said quietly, "You did this. You raised her to be like this." "Rachel did this. I'm just trying not to mess it up." "You're doing better than you think." The restaurant had transformed around them while they worked. What had started as a collection of stranded strangers was becoming something else, a temporary community bound together by circumstance and making the best of it. People moved between tables, sharing food and stories. Someone had found a guitar somewhere and was playing Christmas carols in the corner. The paper snowflakes multiplied, spreading from window to window until the whole front of the restaurant was covered in white paper wishes. Lily had been tireless, moving from group to group, teaching her mother's technique to anyone who would learn. But eventually even her energy began to flag. Her movements grew slower, her eyelids heavier, until finally she curled up on the booth seat with her head in Nathan's lap and cinnamon clutched to her chest. "She's amazing," Evelyn said softly, watching the sleeping child. "I've never met anyone like her. She gets it from Rachel." Nathan stroked his daughter's hair. Rachel could walk into a room full of strangers and walk out with a dozen new friends. She had this gift for making people feel seen, like they mattered, like they weren't invisible. Lily has the same gift. She does. And sometimes it terrifies me because the world isn't always kind to people who care that much. But I wouldn't change it. I couldn't. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. He didn't pull away. "When Rachel died," he said quietly, "people kept telling me how sorry they were, how they couldn't imagine losing a spouse. And I wanted to scream at them that losing Rachel wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was looking at Lily and knowing that she would grow up without a mother. That all those moments Rachel was supposed to be there for, the first boyfriend, and the prom dress, and the college visits, and the wedding she was going to have to face alone. That's what kept me up at night. Not my own grief. Hers. You're doing a good job with her. Anyone can see that. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I just try to remember what Rachel would do and then do that. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe none of us know what we're doing. We just make it up as we go and hope we don't screw up too badly." Nathan looked at her, at this woman he'd met only hours ago, who somehow felt like she'd been part of his life for longer. The candlelight caught her hair, her eyes the silver snowflake at her throat. She was still beautiful, still clearly out of his league by any objective measure, but she was also tired and rumpled and real, and that made her more beautiful still. "Evelyn, I want to tell you something." She waited. "When I walked in here tonight, I was ready to fail. I expected to fail. I'd already written the story of how this evening would go wrong, how I'd be awkward and she'd be bored, and we'd both go home relieved it was over." He took a breath. "But this right now, talking to you, making paper snowflakes with my daughter while the world tries to bury us in snow, this is the best night I've had in 3 years. And I don't know what that means or where it goes or if it goes anywhere at all, but I wanted you to know." Evelyn felt her eyes prickle with tears that she refused to let fall. "I was ready to fail too. I've been ready to fail at everything except work for the past 3 years. It's easier that way. If you never try, you can never be disappointed. But but your daughter looked at me like she could see straight through to my soul, and instead of running away, I wanted to stay and find out what she saw there." Evelyn shook her head. "I don't know what that means either. I don't trust myself to know. I've been wrong before." The fiancé, Marcus, the name tasted bitter on her tongue. We were together for 2 years, engaged for 14 months. I thought I knew him better than I knew myself, and the whole time he was sleeping with my best friend. Nathan winced. That's the night before our wedding. Evelyn's voice was flat. He told me in our honeymoon suite, said he couldn't marry me with the lie between us. Like that made it noble somehow, like destroying my entire life was an act of integrity. What happened to him? He married her, Diane. They're expecting a baby. I'm sorry. Don't be, it was a long time ago. But her hand tightened on his, and Nathan understood that some wounds didn't close no matter how much time passed. For what it's worth, he said quietly, he was an idiot. Any man who would choose someone else over you is missing something fundamental in his soul. Evelyn laughed, but it was a fragile sound. You barely know me. I know you ran into a snowstorm to help find a child who wasn't yours. I know you sat on the floor and made paper snowflakes because a 7-year-old asked you to. I know you carry your sister with you everywhere, literally around your neck, because love doesn't end when someone dies. He met her eyes. I know enough. Evelyn didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to this, to someone seeing her so clearly and accepting what they saw. Her professional world was built on image and impression, on showing people what they wanted to see. Here was a man who seemed to see what was actually there, and he wasn't turning away. Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something incomprehensible, and Nathan automatically adjusted his position to keep her comfortable. It was such a natural gesture, so full of unconscious tenderness, that Evelyn felt her heart clench. I should check on her, Nathan said. Make sure she's warm enough. He reached for a blanket that had been left on the seat beside them, and in that moment of distraction, neither of them noticed that Lily's eyes had opened. The girl lay still, watching through her lashes as her father tucked the blanket around her, as Evelyn smiled at the scene, as the two adults exchanged a look that even a 7-year-old could recognize as something significant. Lily closed her eyes again, but she was smiling. Her plan was working. The night deepened around them. The storm showed no signs of abating, and one by one the other guests began settling in for sleep. The restaurant staff distributed more blankets and pillows, dimmed the lights, turned the bar into a coffee station for anyone who needed a warm drink in the small hours. Nathan carried Lily to a more comfortable spot, a padded bench near the fireplace where she could stretch out properly. He tucked blankets around her, made sure Cinnamon was within reach, and sat beside her in case she woke and needed him. Evelyn joined them, settling into a chair nearby. She'd kicked off her heels hours ago and pulled a blanket around her shoulders, and with her makeup worn away and her hair losing its perfect styling, she looked younger somehow, less armored. You should try to sleep, Nathan said. So should you. Someone needs to keep watch. Watch for what the storm isn't going to break through the windows and carry us away. You never know. He smiled slightly. Besides, I haven't slept through a night in 3 years. Habit at this point. Evelyn studied him in the firelight. Insomnia. Memories. They always come when it's quiet. Lying in bed in the dark, that's when I can't help remembering every detail of that night. The phone call from the hospital. The drive that felt like it took hours. The doctor with the kind face and the terrible words. He shook his head. So I stay up. I read, or I work on repairs, or I just sit and listen to Lily breathing in the next room. Eventually morning comes and I can pretend to be okay again. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's better than the alternative. The dreams are worse. Evelyn nodded, understanding in her eyes. After Sophie died, I used to dream about her. She'd be right there alive and laughing, and we'd be in the middle of a normal conversation, and then I'd remember. In the dream, I'd remember that she was gone, and I'd try to tell her, try to warn her, but I could never get the words out. And then I'd wake up, and for just a second, I'd forget. And then the remembering would hit me all over again, fresh as the first day. The forgetting and remembering, that's the worst part. It gets easier, or you get more used to it. I'm not sure which. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire, listening to the muffled howl of the wind outside. The other guests had mostly settled, scattered throughout the restaurant in small islands of sleeping humanity. The night crew kept coffee coming and spoke in whispers. It was nearly midnight when Lily woke. She sat up suddenly, her eyes wide and unfocused, the way children sometimes do when emerging from deep sleep into an unfamiliar place. For a moment, she seemed confused, looking around at the dimmed restaurant, the sleeping strangers, the windows covered with paper snowflakes. "Daddy?" Nathan was beside her instantly. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're okay. We're still at the restaurant, remember?" "Because of the storm." Lily nodded slowly, but her eyes had fixed on the windows. Beyond the paper snowflakes, the storm still raged snow, whipping past in sheets so thick the streetlights were barely visible. "Daddy, look. The snow is dancing." Nathan followed her gaze. She was right in a way. The wind was doing strange things to the snow, creating spiraling patterns that did look almost like dancing. For a moment, they watched together in silence. "Mom loved the snow," Lily said softly. "She said it was like the sky was sending down kisses." "I remember. I want to feel it." Lily's voice had taken on a dreamy quality. "Just for a second, I want to catch a snowflake." "Sweetheart, we can't go outside. It's too dangerous." "Not outside, just by the door, just to see." Nathan shook his head. "Not tonight. When the storm is over, we'll go out and catch all the snowflakes you want." Lily seemed to accept this, settling back down under her blanket, but her eyes kept returning to the windows, to the hypnotic swirl of white beyond the glass. Evelyn had watched this exchange from her chair, and something in Lily's expression made her uneasy. She'd seen that look before on Sophie's face when her sister would become fixated on something and wouldn't let it go until she'd followed through. It was the look of someone who had made up their mind. "I'm going to get some coffee," she said, standing. "Can I bring you anything?" Nathan nodded gratefully. "Coffee would be great. Thank you." Evelyn made her way to the coffee station that had been set up near the bar. The restaurant was quiet now, most of the stranded guests sleeping or dozing, only a few staff members still moving about. She poured 2 cups of coffee, added cream to Nathan's, because she'd noticed that's how he'd been drinking it earlier, and turned to head back. She was halfway across the restaurant when she heard the scream. It wasn't Nathan's voice, though his shout followed a split second later. It was a woman near the front of the restaurant, one of the staff members, her hand pressed to her mouth as she stared at the door that was standing open, the door that was letting in a howling gust of snow and freezing wind, the door through which a small figure had just disappeared into the white void beyond. Evelyn dropped the coffee cups and ran. Nathan was already on his feet, his face a mask of terror that Evelyn would never forget as long as she lived. He was shouting Lily's name, fighting against the wind that was pushing through the open door, trying to see into the impenetrable wall of white. "Lily, Lily!" Other people were waking now, drawn by the commotion. But Nathan wasn't waiting for help. He pushed through the door and vanished into the storm. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She grabbed someone's coat from a nearby chair. It was too big, but it was something, and followed him out. The cold hit her like a physical assault. One moment she was in the warm restaurant, and the next she was in a world that had become nothing but wind and white, and a cold so intense it stole the breath from her lungs. She couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. The snow was driving sideways needles of ice that stung her face and blinded her eyes. "Nathan!" she screamed, but the wind tore the word away. She stumbled forward, one arm raised to shield her face, trying to follow some instinct about which direction Nathan had gone. The snow was already ankle-deep and climbing, drifting against the parked cars and building walls, creating a landscape that was completely unrecognizable. Somewhere ahead, she heard Nathan's voice, ragged and desperate. Lily, answer me." Evelyn pushed toward the sound, her heels completely useless in the snow, her borrowed coat already soaked through. She crashed into something hard, a parked car, and used it to orient herself. If Lily had wandered this direction, she might have sought shelter, might have found something to hide behind. She worked her way along the car, calling Lily's name, listening for any response. The wind was so loud it was hard to hear anything else, but then there was a sob, small and terrified, and coming from somewhere to her left. Evelyn turned and pushed through a drift that came up to her knees. Her foot caught on something, and she felt her hands sinking into cold that burned like fire. She pulled herself up and kept going, following that sound, that tiny sound that was getting louder. And there, huddled in the small space between 2 SUVs, was Lily. The girl was curled into a ball, her arms wrapped around herself, her whole body shaking violently. She was wearing nothing but the dress she'd had on in the restaurant. No coat, no hat, no protection at all against the killing cold. Her golden hair was already white with snow, her lips already turning blue. "Lily!" Evelyn dropped to her knees beside the child, pulling off the borrowed coat and wrapping it around her. Lily, I'm here. I've got you. Lily looked up at her with eyes that were glassy and unfocused. I heard, I heard Mommy. She said, she said to wait, that someone was coming. I'm here now. We need to get you inside. I wanted to catch a snowflake for Daddy, but then I couldn't find the door and the snow was so big and I know, sweetheart, I know, but we have to go now. Evelyn tried to lift the girl, but her arms were numb from the cold, and Lily was heavier than she looked, dead weight, with shock and hypothermia. She managed to get the child into her arms, staggering under the weight, but she couldn't see which direction led back to the restaurant. Everything was white. Everything was the same. Nathan, she screamed. Nathan, I found her. For a terrible moment, there was nothing but the wind. Then, like a miracle, a shape emerged from the swirling white Nathan's face, wild with fear, his hands reaching for his daughter. Lily, oh God, Lily. He took the child from Evelyn's arms, clutching her to his chest, and for a moment he just stood there, in the middle of the blizzard, holding his daughter and shaking with something that went beyond cold. We have to get back inside, Evelyn shouted over the wind. She's hypothermic. She needs warmth. Nathan nodded, unable to speak. Evelyn grabbed his arm and pulled, orienting them toward what she hoped was the restaurant. They stumbled through the snow together, Nathan carrying Lily. Evelyn leading the way, both of them half blind and frozen, but moving, always moving. The light appeared suddenly, a rectangle of gold in the white void, and then hands were reaching for them, pulling them inside, and the door was slamming shut against the storm. The next few minutes were chaos. Someone produced more blankets. Someone else called 911, though the dispatcher said emergency services were suspended due to the storm. Roberto appeared with hot water bottles and towels. The family they'd befriended earlier, Jennifer and Michael, helped strip off Lily's wet clothes and wrap her in dry blankets. Nathan refused to let go of his daughter. He sat on the floor with her in his lap, rubbing her arms and legs to restore circulation, his face gray with terror and guilt. I should have been watching her. I should have known she'd try something like this. I should have... Stop. Evelyn knelt beside him, her own teeth chattering, her hands still burning from the cold. She's going to be okay. Look, her color's coming back. It was true, the blue was fading from Lily's lips, replaced by a more natural pink. Her shivering was intensifying, which was actually a good sign, her body fighting to warm itself. Daddy, Lily's voice was weak but clear. Daddy, I'm sorry, I just wanted to catch a snowflake. For you. Because you've been so sad, and I thought maybe if I caught a wish. Nathan made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. You scared me half to death, baby. Don't you ever, ever do that again. I won't, I promise. Lily's eyes moved to Evelyn. You found me. I did. How did you know where I was? Evelyn thought about the sob she'd heard, the instinct that had pulled her in the right direction, the strange certainty that had guided her through the white void. I'm not sure, I followed the sound of your voice, and I found you. Lily smiled a small, tired smile. Mommy told me someone was coming. I heard her voice in the snow. She said, don't be scared, baby. Someone's coming to find you. Just stay where you are. And then you came. Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She looked at Nathan, saw the same stunned recognition in his eyes. He was thinking what she was thinking, the impossible, irrational thought that maybe, just maybe, Rachel had somehow guided them both. Your mom was right, Evelyn said softly. I found you. Because you're the one, Lily murmured, her eyes already closing. Mommy knew. That's why she sent you. The child slipped into sleep, a natural sleep, this time warm and safe in her father's arms. Nathan held her close, his face buried in her golden hair, his shoulders shaking with silent tears. Evelyn put her hand on his back, a gesture of comfort, of connection, of something she couldn't name. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them, while the storm raged outside and the paper snowflakes swayed in the warm air rising from the heaters. Eventually, someone brought dry clothes for Evelyn, donated by other guests, and hot tea for both adults. Nathan wouldn't move Lily from his lap, so they made a nest of blankets around him, turning the corner by the fireplace into a cocoon of warmth and safety. When Evelyn had changed into the borrowed clothes, oversized sweatpants, and a Northwestern hoodie that must have belonged to one of the college kids stranded here, she returned to find Nathan exactly where she'd left him. But his tears had stopped, and when he looked up at her, there was something different in his eyes. You saved her life. I found her. That's all. That's not all. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her down to sit beside him. You went into that storm without hesitation. You didn't even think about it. You just went. Of course I did. She's... Evelyn stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. She's what? She's a child. She's your daughter. She's someone I've known for a few hours, but somehow feel like I've known forever. She's everything, Nathan said, and you saved her. Evelyn looked at the sleeping child, at the small face, peaceful now, against her father's chest. She said she heard her mother's voice in the storm. I know. Do you believe her? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. I believe she heard something, whether it was Rachel or her own instinct or just, I don't know, but something told her to stay where she was, and something led you to her. He looked at Evelyn. I've never believed in anything I couldn't see and touch and fix with my own two hands. But tonight I don't know what to believe anymore. Maybe you don't have to figure it out tonight. Maybe not. He squeezed her hand. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you properly for what you did, but thank you. You don't have to thank me. I couldn't lose her. I know that sounds strange because I barely know her, but the thought of her out there in the cold alone and scared. Evelyn's voice broke. I couldn't bear it. Nathan reached up and brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. It was such an intimate gesture, so tender and unexpected that Evelyn felt her breath catch. You're not a stranger anymore, he said quietly. Not after tonight. Whatever happens after this, wherever we go from here, you'll never be a stranger to me again. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and leaned her head against his shoulder. They sat like that, the three of them, while the fire crackled and the storm howled, and the night slowly began to give way to dawn. Across the restaurant at the bar, a man watched this scene with narrowed eyes. Derek Morrison was on his sixth whiskey, and his patience had long since worn thin. He'd come to Rosewood on a whim, having heard through the office grapevine that Margaret Chen had finally succeeded in getting the Ice Queen to agree to a blind date. He'd expected to find Evelyn suffering through an awkward evening with some unsuitable match, counting the minutes until she could escape. Instead, he was watching her play hero, rescue a child, and cuddle up with a nobody handyman like they were starring in some kind of Hallmark movie. It was intolerable. Derek Morrison was accustomed to getting what he wanted. Son of the company founder, heir apparent to the CEO position, his father would eventually vacate. He moved through life with the expectation that doors would open and obstacles would clear. Women in particular had never presented a challenge. His looks, his money, his position, they combined to create an irresistible package that had served him well for years. But Evelyn Harper had resisted him since the day she'd walked into Morrison and Associates. Every dinner invitation declined with polite professionalism. Every after-work drink rejected with a smile that never reached her eyes. Every holiday party where he'd positioned himself beside her, she'd found a reason to circulate elsewhere. She was the one woman who didn't seem to recognize his value, and that made her the only woman he wanted. Now here she was trapped in the same restaurant by the same storm, and instead of coming to him for comfort and companionship, she'd run into a blizzard to save a kid she'd just met and was now making goddamn paper snowflakes with a man who fixed toilets for a living. Derek finished his whiskey and ordered another. He watched the tender scene by the fireplace, the way Evelyn leaned against the handyman, the way they looked at each other like they'd found something precious and unexpected, and he felt something twist in his gut that might have been jealousy or might have been fury. She'd never looked at him like that, never shown him anything but professional courtesy and barely concealed discomfort. But she was showing this stranger warmth, opening up, letting her guard down. Derek would have to remind her why that was a mistake. The night was young and he was patient. He'd find his moment. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Nathan felt Lily stir in his arms. She opened her eyes, slowly blinking in the gray light, and looked up at Boyum with an expression of complete contentment. Is the storm over? Almost, sweetheart. How do you feel? Warm. She snuggled closer. Evelyn saved me, Daddy. She found me into the snow. I know, she was very brave. Lily turned her head to look at Evelyn, who had fallen asleep against Nathan's shoulder at some point during the long night. In sleep, she looked younger, more vulnerable, the sharp professional edges softened by exhaustion. "Daddy," Lily whispered, "I really like her." "I know you do, baby." "No, I mean," Lily paused, searching for words. "I mean, she feels right, like she's supposed to be here with us." Nathan looked at the sleeping woman, at the snowflake pendant that had slipped to the side of her neck, at the way her hand was still loosely clasped in his. "I know what you mean," he said softly. "I feel it too." "Good." Lily smiled and closed her eyes again. "Then everything is going to be okay." Nathan held his daughter close and watched the first rays of sunlight begin to filter through the storm clouds. The wind was dying down, the snow falling more gently now, and through the windows, covered with paper snowflakes, he could see the world beginning to emerge from the white void. Everything was going to be okay. For the first time in 3 years, he actually believed it. When Nathan woke again, it was to the sound of his daughter's voice. "Daddy, Daddy, wake up." He opened his eyes, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned: the restaurant, the storm, the terrifying minutes when Lily had disappeared into the blizzard, and then Evelyn. His hand was still intertwined with hers, both of them having fallen asleep in their respective seats, connected across the space between them. Lily was standing in front of him, cinnamon in her arms, her expression bright despite everything she'd been through. The storm stopped. Nathan sat up carefully, disengaging his hand from Evelyn's without waking her. Through the windows he could see that the world outside had transformed. The fury of the previous night had given way to a crystalline stillness. Snow lay in deep drifts everywhere, covering cars and mailboxes and fire hydrants, turning Chicago into a white wonderland. "What time is it?" "I don't know, but the sun is up." He checked his phone, 42 a.m. And miracle of miracles, the service had been restored. His messages were filling with notifications, weather updates, news alerts about the historic storm that had dumped nearly 2 feet of snow on the city overnight. Around them, the restaurant was beginning to stir. Other guests were waking, stretching, gathering their belongings. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the bar, and the staff were beginning to pass out pastries and fruit from whatever the kitchen had managed to scavenge. Evelyn woke with a start when Nathan stood up, her eyes wide for a moment before she oriented herself. "Storm's over," he said. She looked toward the windows at the brilliant white world beyond, and something in her expression shifted. "It's beautiful." "It is." But Nathan was looking at her, not the snow. Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go home now, Daddy? I want to build a snowman." "We can try. The streets might still be messy." He paused, looking at his daughter seriously. "But first we need to talk about what happened last night. You scared us very badly." Lily's face fell. "I know, I'm really sorry, Daddy. I just wanted to catch a snowflake for you. I thought if I caught a wish, maybe it would help you be happy again." Nathan knelt down to her level. "Lily, I need you to understand something. You're the reason I'm happy. You, just you, being here, being safe, being my daughter. I don't need caught snowflakes or wishes or anything else. I just need you." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "But you've been so sad since Mommy died. And I thought maybe if I did something special." "You are something special." Nathan pulled her into a hug. "Every day, you wake up and smile at me. Every time you laugh at something silly, every paper snowflake you make, that's special. That's more than enough. I don't need you to go into blizzards to prove you love me. I know you love me. And I love you more than all the snowflakes and all the storms." Lily clung to him. "I'm sorry, I won't do it again. I promise." "Good." He kissed the top of her head. "Because I can't lose you too. Do you understand? I can't." "You won't." Lily pulled back and looked at him with those ancient blue eyes. "Mommy told me, in the storm, she said she would always protect us. Both of us." Nathan didn't know what to say to that, so he just held his daughter close and let the moment be what it was: complicated and painful, and somehow, against all odds, full of hope. The restaurant manager, Roberto, appeared with an announcement. Streets were being cleared. Public transit was slowly resuming. Ride shares were beginning to operate again. They were free to leave whenever they were ready. Nathan looked at Evelyn. "Can I don't suppose you need a walk home?" She smiled, and it was the unguarded smile that he had first seen in the firelight. "I live in the opposite direction. Then maybe I could call you a car, or we could share one, or..." He realized he was fumbling, the morning after awkwardness settling in despite the innocence of the night. I just don't want to say goodbye yet. Lily, with the directness of children, solved the problem. You should come to our house for hot chocolate. We always have hot chocolate after snow, and we can show you Mom's snowflakes. We have boxes and boxes of them from every year. They're really pretty. Evelyn looked at Nathan, a question in her eyes. You'd be welcome, he said, if you want. She hesitated. He could see the war happening behind her eyes, the wall rising and falling, the fear and the hope battling for dominance. I should probably get home, she said slowly. I need to change, and there's work tomorrow, and Lily's face fell, and Nathan felt his own heart sink, and the moment stretched out unbearably until Evelyn smiled. But maybe you could give me your number, and maybe I could come by later. After I've had a shower and found some clothes that don't smell like I slept in a restaurant. Nathan felt his face break into a grin that probably looked ridiculous, but that he couldn't control. I'd like that. I'd really like that. They exchanged numbers. Nathan programmed hers into his phone with careful attention, as if the digits themselves were precious. Evelyn took his card, a simple thing with just his name and numbers, and the cards he gave to clients who needed their toilets fixed, and she looked at it like it was something valuable. I'll call you, she said. I'll answer. They stood there for a moment, the case of the departing restaurant guests swirling around them, neither quite sure how to end this. Lily solved that problem too. She walked up to Evelyn and raised her arms, the universal child signal for pick me up. Evelyn looked surprised but bent down and lifted the girl into her arms. Thank you for finding me in the storm, Lily said seriously, and for making Daddy smile. Evelyn hugged her, and over the little girl's shoulder, Nathan saw her blink rapidly against tears. Thank you for the paper snowflake, Evelyn said. I'm going to keep it forever. Good. Lily kissed her cheek, a wet, sloppy child's kiss that left Evelyn laughing. See you later for hot chocolate. I'll be there. Lily slid down from Evelyn's arms and took her father's hand, ready to leave, her mission apparently accomplished to her satisfaction. Nathan lingered for just a moment. Last night, he said quietly, when Lily was lost and you went into that storm, thank you. I don't think I said it properly before. You could have been killed. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Evelyn's voice was firm. I had to. I can't explain it any better than that. I just had to. He nodded understanding in a way that went beyond words. Hot chocolate first, he said. Everything else after. She smiled. Hot chocolate first. And then they parted, going their separate ways into the glittering white morning, both of them carrying something that hadn't existed the day before. Not love, not yet, but the soil in which love might grow. A possibility, a hope, a reason to believe that broken things might somehow improbably learn to be whole again. Nathan and Lily walked home through the snow-covered streets, the city slowly coming back to life around them. Plows rumbled past their blades, scraping against pavement. People emerged from buildings with shovels, beginning the long process of digging out. Children squealed and threw snowballs released from the tension of the storm into the joy of its aftermath. Lily chattered the whole way home about the snowflakes they'd made, about how nice Evelyn was, about how Cinnamon had been very brave during the scary parts. Nathan listened with half an ear, the other half still replaying the night, still marveling at the unexpected turn his life had taken. Daddy, Lily said as they turned onto their street, do you think Mom sent the storm? Nathan stopped walking. What do you mean, sweetheart? I mean, you weren't going to stay at the restaurant. You were going to leave and then come get me, and we were going to go home. But then the storm came and you couldn't leave, and you had to stay and talk to Evelyn, and now you're smiling. You're smiling like you used to smile before Mom went to heaven. Lily looked up at him with those ancient eyes. So maybe Mom sent the storm to make you stay. Nathan knelt in the snow, bringing himself to his daughter's eye level. Maybe she did, or maybe it was just a storm, but either way, I'm glad we stayed. Me too. Lily threw her arms around his neck. I like Evelyn. I like her a lot. Yeah. Nathan hugged his daughter tight, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been clenched for 3 years. I like her too. They continued home, and Nathan thought about what Lily had said, about Rachel sending the storm, about the strange coincidences that had brought him and Evelyn together. The shared grief, the snowflake connection, the way Lily had seen something in this stranger that no one else could see. He didn't believe in signs and wonders. He was a practical man who fixed practical problems. But he also couldn't deny that something extraordinary had happened in that restaurant, something that felt orchestrated by forces beyond his understanding. Maybe Rachel had sent the storm, or maybe Sophie had, or maybe the universe just occasionally decided to be kind, pairing broken people together and giving them a chance to heal. Whatever the explanation, Nathan was grateful. For the first time in 3 years, he was genuinely, unreservedly grateful for being alive. Their apartment was cold when they got home, the heating having been off during the storm. Nathan turned it on and made real hot chocolate, the good kind from the recipe Rachel had perfected, with actual melted chocolate and a pinch of cinnamon and tiny marshmallows floating on top. They drank it together on the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow sparkle outside the window, where last year's paper snowflakes still hung. Nathan made a mental note to make new ones this year. With Evelyn if she came, when she came, he had to start believing in when instead of if. His phone buzzed. A text message. Made it home. Currently thawing in a hot shower. Looking forward to hot chocolate later. What time works? Nathan smiled at his phone like a teenager. Come whenever you want. We'll be here. Lily looked at his expression and grinned. Is that Evelyn? Yes. Is she coming for hot chocolate? Yes. Good. Lily snuggled deeper into the blankets. She needs us, Daddy. She doesn't know it yet, but she does, and we need her. And Cinnamon says that when three people need each other, that's called a family. Nathan looked at his daughter, at the wisdom in her young eyes, at the certainty with which she spoke about things he was still afraid to hope for. Cinnamon might be right. Cinnamon is always right. Lily kissed the top of her bear's worn head. And so was Mom. She told me before she went to heaven that you would be well for a while, but that someday someone would come and help you be happy again. I think Evelyn is the someone. Nathan felt his eyes burn. Rachel told you that in the hospital when she was saying goodbye. Lily's voice was matter of fact, the way children discuss the impossible. She said she had to go, but that she would send someone to take care of us. She said to watch for snowflakes because that's how I would know. Nathan pulled his daughter close, burying his face in her golden hair. He hadn't known about this conversation. He'd been in the hallway talking to doctors when Rachel and Lily had said their final goodbye. Why didn't you tell me before? Because you weren't ready. You were too sad, but now you're less well, and Evelyn came and she has a snowflake around her neck, and I think it's time. Lily patted his cheek. Don't cry, Daddy. They're happy tears, right? The happiest he managed. They sat together until the apartment warmed up, until the hot chocolate was gone, until the morning turned to afternoon. And when the doorbell rang at 4 o'clock and Nathan opened it to find Evelyn standing there with snowflakes in her hair and a bottle of wine in her hands and an expression of nervous hope on her face, he knew. This was the beginning of something. Not the replacement of what he'd lost, never that, but the growth of something new in the space that grief had carved out. A second chance at joy, a possibility that Lily had seen before he could. Hi, Evelyn said. Hi, he said back. And then Lily was there, pulling Evelyn inside, demanding to show her the snowflake boxes, chattering about cocoa and cinnamon, and how Daddy always made it with too many marshmallows. But that was okay because you could never have too many marshmallows. And Evelyn was laughing, really laughing, the sound filling the small apartment like music. And Nathan was smiling like he used to smile before everything fell apart. And outside, the sun was setting over a city transformed by snow, painting the white world in shades of gold and pink. And somewhere, perhaps, two women who had loved snowflakes were watching, satisfied that their work was done. The days that followed the storm moved with a rhythm Nathan had forgotten existed. Evelyn came for hot chocolate that first afternoon and stayed until Lily fell asleep on the couch between them, her golden head resting against Evelyn's arm as if it belonged there. She came back the next day and the day after that, and somehow, without anyone making a formal decision, she became a fixture in their small apartment, a presence that filled spaces Nathan hadn't realized were empty. They took things slow as they'd promised each other. No grand declarations, no rushing toward a future neither of them was ready to define. Instead, they built something quieter, more careful. Evelyn would arrive after work still in her sharp professional clothes, and within an hour she'd be sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Lily with homework, or standing at the stove learning Nathan's recipe for the pasta sauce Rachel had taught him years ago. The transformation fascinated him, the way she shed her armor piece by piece, revealing the woman underneath who laughed easily and listened intently and looked at Lily like she was discovering something precious. 2 weeks after the storm, Nathan woke to find Lily already up sitting at the kitchen table with paper and scissors spread before her. Evelyn's paper snowflake, the lopsided one from that first night at Rosewood Bistro, was propped against the salt shaker like a centerpiece. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" Lily looked up with determined concentration. "Making more snowflakes. We need lots of them for when Evelyn comes for Christmas dinner." Nathan's heart stuttered. They hadn't discussed Christmas. It was still 10 days away, and the holiday loomed in his mind the way it always did, heavy with memories of Rachel and the anniversary of her death. He'd been so caught up in the newness of Evelyn that he'd almost managed to forget what December 24th really meant. "Lily, we haven't actually invited Evelyn for Christmas." "Then you should." Lily's scissors snipped with precision. "She doesn't have anyone else. She told me her mama's in Florida, and her dad doesn't talk to her. That means she'd be alone on Christmas, and nobody should be alone on Christmas, Daddy. Mom always said that." Nathan sat down across from his daughter, watching her small hands work the paper. She was right, of course. Rachel had believed fiercely in the sacredness of Christmas, in gathering people together, in making sure no one spent the holiday feeling forgotten. Their apartment had always been full on December 25th, overflowing with friends and neighbors, and anyone Rachel had discovered might otherwise be alone. "I'll ask her," he said finally, "but it might be complicated for her. Christmas is hard when you've lost someone." Lily looked at him with those eyes that saw too much. "It's hard for you too, but you still do it. Because of me and because Mom would want you to. Maybe Evelyn needs someone to want her to also." Nathan reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. "When did you get so smart?" "Mom taught me, and cinnamon helps." He laughed, the sound still feeling new in his throat after so many years of silence, and went to make breakfast, while Lily continued her snowflake production. By the time Evelyn arrived that evening, the windows were covered with paper creations, each one different, each one catching the light from the street lamps outside. Evelyn stopped in the doorway when she saw them, her breath catching. "Oh," the word was barely a whisper. "They're beautiful." Lily bounced up from the couch. "I made them for Christmas. You're coming for Christmas, right? Daddy's going to ask you. I already told him he has to." Nathan felt his face flush. "Lily, I was going to ease into that. Easing takes too long." Lily grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her toward the window display. "See, this one is for you because it has 6 points like the one on your necklace. And this one is for Daddy because it's kind of crooked but in a nice way. And this one is for me because it has a heart shape in the middle, see? And this one..." Nathan watched Evelyn's face as Lily continued her tour of the snowflakes. He saw the moment when emotion overcame her, the way her jaw tightened and her eyes grew bright. She knelt down to Lily's level and pulled the girl into a hug that seemed to surprise them both. "I would love to come for Christmas." Evelyn's voice was thick. "I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be." Lily hugged her back fiercely. "Good, because I already made you a present, and it would be weird if you weren't here to open it." The evening settled into its usual pattern. Dinner homework helped the comfortable domesticity that had grown between them like something organic and unplanned. But Nathan noticed that Evelyn was quieter than usual, her smiles not quite reaching her eyes, her attention drifting to places he couldn't follow. After Lily was in bed, they sat together on the couch, the apartment dark except for the string of Christmas lights that Lily had insisted on hanging the previous weekend. Evelyn was holding her wine glass but not drinking, her thumb tracing patterns on the stem. "What's wrong?" Nathan asked. She didn't answer immediately, and when she did, her voice was careful. "Derek cornered me at work today." Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd thought about Derek Morrison occasionally over the past 2 weeks, usually when Evelyn mentioned work, but he'd assumed the man had faded into the background, just another unpleasant colleague to be managed. What did he want? The same thing he always wants. Me. Evelyn took a sip of wine. "But he's getting more aggressive about it, making comments about my new friend, asking questions about where I've been spending my evenings. He came into my office today and closed the door, and for a moment I thought..." She didn't finish, but Nathan understood. The fear in her voice was real. "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly. He's too smart for that. But he made it clear that he's watching, that he knows about us, and that he thinks I'm making a mistake. Evelyn set down her wine glass. He said some things about you, about how you're not in my league, how I'm slumming, how eventually I'll get bored with playing house with a handyman and his kid. Nathan absorbed the words, feeling them land like blows. The insecurity that he'd been fighting since that first night at Rosewood Bistro rose up again, whispering that Derek was right, that this was all too good to last, that eventually Evelyn would see him clearly and realize she'd made an error. Maybe he has a point. Evelyn's head snapped toward him. Excuse me. Look at your life, Evelyn. Look at mine. You run million-dollar campaigns. I fix broken toilets. You wear clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. I shop at thrift stores because that's all I can afford. You belong in penthouses and boardrooms. I belong in basements and crawl spaces. Nathan heard the bitterness in his own voice and couldn't stop it. Derek's an ass, but he's not wrong about everything. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up, and for a terrible second, Nathan thought she was leaving, thought his self-destructive spiral had finally pushed her away. Instead, she walked to the window, to the snowflakes Lily had made, and stood there with her back to him. You know what Sophie used to say about me? Her voice was quiet. She said I was the smartest dumb person she'd ever met. Straight A's in school, top of my class at Northwestern, youngest senior director in the history of Morrison and Associates. But when it came to understanding what actually matters, I was hopeless. I chased money and status and the approval of people who didn't care about me, and I called it success. She turned to face him. Sophie was a broke art history student with no career prospects and a maxed out credit card, and she was happier than I've ever been. Because she knew something I didn't. She knew that the value of a life isn't measured in salary or job title or the labels in your clothes. Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but Evelyn wasn't finished. I have spent 3 years in the world Derek Morrison thinks I belong in. Penthouses and boardrooms and charity galas where everyone smiles and nobody means it. I have dated men with perfect resumes and impressive portfolios and absolutely nothing behind their eyes. And every single night I've gone home to an empty apartment and wondered what the point of any of it was. She walked back to the couch, sat down beside him, took his hands in hers. Then I met you. You with your worn-out jacket and your calloused hands and your daughter who sees angels in snowflakes. And for the first time in years, I felt something. Something real. Something that matters. If that makes me stupid, if it means I'm slumming, then fine. I'd rather be stupid and happy than smart and empty. Nathan looked at her, at the fierce conviction in her eyes, and felt something shift inside him. The wall he'd been trying to rebuild, the protection against inevitable disappointment, it crumbled under the weight of her words. I'm scared. The admission came out rough. I'm scared that I'll let myself believe in this, and then something will happen, and I'll lose you the way I lost Rachel. I'm scared that Derek's right, and I'm not good enough for you. I'm scared that Lily's getting attached, and if this falls apart, it won't just break me, it'll break her too. Evelyn squeezed his hands. I'm scared too. Every day I wake up and there's a voice in my head saying this can't last, saying I don't deserve to be happy, saying you'll eventually see through me and realize I'm just as broken as everyone else. But here's the thing about being scared. She leaned closer. You can be scared and still choose to try. You can expect the worst and still hope for the best. That's what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. Lily said something similar about her mom. Then maybe we should listen to her. She seems to know more than either of us. Nathan laughed, and this time the sound held no bitterness. He pulled Evelyn close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her heart beat against his chest. Derek won't stop, he said into her hair. Men like that when they don't get what they want. Let me worry about Derek. I've been handling him for 5 years. I know his weaknesses. What are his weaknesses? Evelyn smiled against his shoulder. His ego. His assumption that everyone can be bought or intimidated. And his complete inability to believe that a woman might genuinely prefer someone else. She pulled back to look at him. I'm not going to let him ruin this. Whatever this is, wherever it goes, it's ours, not his, and I'll fight for it. Nathan believed her. In that moment, with the Christmas lights casting soft colors across her face and Lily's paper snowflakes dancing in the window he chose to believe. But Derek Morrison was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. 3 days before Christmas, Evelyn left work late, tired from a long meeting about a campaign that wouldn't launch until February, but somehow required urgent attention in the middle of the holiday season. The parking garage was nearly empty, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls as she walked toward her car. She was almost there when Derek stepped out from between two SUVs. Working late, Evelyn. That's dedication. Her heart jumped, but she kept her voice even. Derek, I didn't see you at the meeting. I was there in the back, watching. He moved closer, his expensive shoes silent on the concrete. I'm always watching, you know. It's how I've built my career, seeing things other people miss, understanding situations before anyone else does. Evelyn reached her car, put her hand on the door handle. Good for you. Now, if you'll excuse me, he's using you. Derek's voice was casual, conversational. The handyman, I'm sure he seems genuine, all that wounded widower charm. But think about it. A man in his position struggling to make ends meet suddenly has a senior director from Morrison and Associates interested in him. He'd be an idiot not to play that for all it's worth. Nathan isn't playing anything. He didn't even know who I was when we met. Didn't he? Derek smiled, and there was something reptilian in it. You sure about that? 'Cause I did a little digging. Turns out his wife's hospital bills were significant. Turns out he's been struggling financially for years. Turns out he's got a daughter who's going to need college someday and a job that pays by the hour. He moved closer, still close enough that Evelyn could smell his cologne. A man like that meets a woman like you. He sees a solution to all his problems. He just has to be patient, charming, vulnerable enough to trigger your rescue instinct. You're disgusting. I'm realistic. Something you've never been good at, Evelyn. You see what you want to see. It's your fatal flaw. You wanted to believe Marcus loved you, so you ignored all the signs that he was sleeping with your best friend. You want to believe the handyman loves you, so you're ignoring the obvious truth that you're his meal ticket. Evelyn yanked open her car door. Stay away from me, Derek, and stay away from Nathan. Or what? Derek's smile widened. You'll report me to HR. Go ahead. My father is HR, among other things. You'll find that complaints against Morrison family members have a way of disappearing. He stepped back, spreading his hands in mock innocence. I'm just trying to help, trying to save you from another heartbreak. But if you want to learn the hard way, be my guest. I'll be here when it falls apart. I'm always here. Evelyn drove home with her hands shaking on the wheel. She told herself not to listen, told herself that Derek was a liar and a manipulator, that nothing he said could be trusted. But the poison had been planted, and she felt it spreading through her thoughts. Nathan's financial struggles. She'd never asked about them, never thought to. Was it possible? Could the connection between them be less spontaneous than it seemed? Could everything, the charm and the vulnerability and the perfect daughter, be part of some calculated play? No, she refused to believe it. Nathan wasn't capable of that kind of deception. She'd looked into his eyes and seen real pain, real hope, real fear. That couldn't be faked. Could it? She didn't go to Nathan's apartment that night. She told herself it was because she was tired, because she needed time to think, because sometimes couples needed space. But the real reason was uglier than that. The real reason was that Derek's words had found their target, and she needed to examine the wound before she could face Nathan again. She didn't go the next night either. Nathan noticed, of course. His text grew increasingly concerned. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? Lily keeps asking about you. But Evelyn didn't know how to respond. What could she say? Derek accused you of being a gold digger, and I can't stop thinking about it. That would be the end of everything, and she wasn't ready for that end. She wasn't sure she'd survive another ending. On Christmas Eve morning, Evelyn woke to a text from an unknown number. You should see this. A friend. Attached was a photograph. Evelyn opened it and felt her world tilt. The image showed Nathan and a woman. They were standing close together, his hand on her arm, her face turned up toward his. The woman was beautiful, dark-haired, and smiling, and she was looking at Nathan with unmistakable intimacy. Evelyn stared at the photograph for a long time. Her hands had gone numb. Her heart was doing something strange, racing and stopping by turns. The text came from Derek. It had to. But that didn't mean the photograph was fake. She dressed mechanically, poured coffee she didn't drink, and sat in her empty apartment while Christmas Eve ticked by outside her windows. Families were gathering, children were anticipating presents, and she was alone again, just as she had always been, just as she had always expected to be. Her phone rang. Nathan. She let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. The voicemails accumulated. Evelyn, please call me back. I don't know what's happening, but Lily's been crying all morning because you're not here. We were supposed to make cookies today. Please. It's Nathan again. I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry. Whatever it is, I'm sorry. Just talk to me. Evelyn, it's Christmas Eve. Rachel died on Christmas Eve, and now you're disappearing on Christmas Eve. Please, I can't do this alone. Not today. That last message broke something in her. The rawness of his voice, the desperation that she recognized because she'd felt it herself. This wasn't the voice of a man running a car. This was the voice of a man who was breaking. She picked up her phone and looked at the photograph again. Really looked this time without the panic and the paranoia. And she noticed something she'd missed before. The woman in the photograph was wearing a green sweater. The same green sweater from the picture Nathan kept on his mantle. The picture of Rachel. The photograph was old. The woman was Rachel. Derek had found an old picture of Nathan with his wife and sent it to Evelyn, hoping she wouldn't look closely, hoping the damage would be done before she could see the truth. The rage that filled her was unlike anything she'd ever felt. It was hot and clean and clarifying, burning away the doubt and the fear and leaving only certainty. Derek Morrison had tried to destroy the first real thing she'd felt in years. He'd used her trauma against her, exploited her insecurities, weaponized her history of betrayal. And he'd almost succeeded. But he'd made a mistake. He'd underestimated her. And he'd underestimated what she was willing to fight for. Evelyn grabbed her coat and her keys and headed for the door. She had 2 stops to make. The first was Derek's apartment. He answered in his robe, clearly surprised to see her, his expression shifting quickly from shock to satisfaction. Evelyn, I didn't expect... She held up her phone, the photograph displayed. Nice try. His satisfaction flickered. I don't know what you're... It's his dead wife, Derek. The woman in the picture is Rachel Cole, who died 3 years ago. Did you really think I wouldn't figure that out? Did you really think I was that stupid? Derek's face went through several expressions before settling on defensive anger. I was trying to protect you. You're so blinded by this fantasy you've constructed that you can't see... I see perfectly clearly. I see a pathetic man who can't accept that a woman might choose someone else over him. I see someone so threatened by genuine connection that he has to destroy it. I see a coward who hides behind his father's company and thinks that makes him powerful. Evelyn stepped closer and Derek actually stepped back. But here's what you don't see, Derek. You don't see that I have documentation of every inappropriate comment you've made to female employees over the past 5 years. You don't see that 3 women have already agreed to corroborate my account of your behavior. And you don't see that I've already scheduled a meeting with your father for January 2nd, where I will present him with a choice, his company's reputation or his son's position. Derek had gone pale. You're bluffing. Try me. Evelyn smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Merry Christmas, Derek. I hope you enjoy it. It might be the last one you spend as a Morrison & Associates employee. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing in his doorway, his robe flapping in the cold wind. The second stop was Nathan's apartment. When he opened the door, his face was gaunt, his eyes red. Behind him, she could see Lily sitting on the couch clutching cinnamon, her expression a mirror of her father's devastation. Evelyn, her name came out like a prayer. I thought you... I know. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her. I know what you thought, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Derek sent me something, and I believed it for a moment, and that moment almost cost me everything. Nathan's face cycled through confusion, understanding, and finally anger. Derek did this? He sent me an old photo of you and Rachel, made it look like you were with another woman. Evelyn crossed to him, took his hands. I should have known immediately. I should have trusted you. Instead, I let my fear take over, and I disappeared, and it's Christmas Eve, and Rachel died on Christmas Eve, and I left you alone with all of that. Nathan pulled her into an embrace so tight it almost hurt. She felt him shaking, felt the tears on her neck, and held on. I thought I'd lost you. His voice was muffled against her shoulder. I thought you'd realized you didn't want this after all. I thought, you haven't lost me. You won't lose me. I'm here and I'm staying, and Derek Morrison can go to hell. From the couch, a small voice piped up. You said a bad word. Evelyn laughed, the sound wet with tears. I did. I'm sorry, Lily. That was inappropriate. Lily got up from the couch and walked over to them, her expression serious. It's okay. Daddy says worse words when he stubs his toe. She looked up at Evelyn. You came back. I came back. I knew you would. Lily wrapped her arms around both of them, her small body completing the circle. I told Daddy you would, but he was too sad to believe me. I said Mom would make sure you came back because Mom knows we need you. Evelyn knelt down, bringing herself to Lily's level. Your mom didn't have to make me come back. I came back because I wanted to, because I love being here with you and your dad, because this is where I belong. Lily studied her for a moment with those ancient eyes. Then she nodded, satisfied. Good, because the cookies aren't going to make themselves, and Daddy always burns them. Nathan laughed, the sound rough but real. I do not always burn them. Last year you set off the smoke detector 3 times. That was a faulty detector. Evelyn stood, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder and reaching for Nathan's hand with the other. How about this year I help? I'm not a great baker, but I'm good at following instructions. That's more than Daddy can say. Nathan rolled his eyes. I'm being ganged up on in my own home. Yes, Evelyn squeezed his hand. Get used to it. They made cookies. They burned a few anyway because Nathan insisted on checking them too often and letting the heat escape. They made hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. They hung more paper snowflakes in the windows until every pane of glass was covered with white paper wishes. And when the clock struck midnight, marking the transition from Christmas Eve to Christmas Day, marking also the 3rd anniversary of Rachel's death, Nathan stood by the window with Evelyn beside him and his daughter asleep on the couch behind them, and he spoke to his wife for the first time in months. I miss you. I'll always miss you. But I think I'm going to be okay now. Evelyn pretended not to hear, giving him the privacy of the moment. But she squeezed his hand tighter, and he squeezed back, and outside the snow began to fall soft and gentle, like a blessing. Like 1,000 angel wishes drifting down from heaven. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of stillness that only comes after snow. The city lay quiet beneath its white blanket streets. Empty sounds muffled the whole world, holding its breath in that sacred pause between night and day. Nathan woke on the couch with Evelyn's head on his shoulder, and Lily sprawled across both their laps, a tangle of limbs and warmth that felt like the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. He didn't move, didn't want to break the spell. Instead, he lay there watching the gray light strengthen through the snowflake-covered windows, feeling the steady rhythm of 2 heartbeats against his own, and allowed himself to believe that this might actually be his life now. Not a dream, not a temporary reprieve from loneliness, but something real and lasting, and his. Lily stirred, first her eyes fluttering open with the instant alertness of children on Christmas morning. She looked up at her father, then at Evelyn, and a smile spread across her face that could have lit the entire apartment. She stayed. The words were whispered, reverent. She stayed. Can we open presents now? Nathan laughed softly. Let Evelyn wake up first. But Evelyn was already stirring, drawn from sleep by their voices. She blinked in the morning light, momentarily confused, then relaxed as memory returned. Her hand found Nathan's and squeezed. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so natural it surprised them both. Fair warning, Lily has been patient for approximately 30 seconds, which is a new record. Lily bounced off the couch. Presents, Daddy. Can we please do presents now? The next hour was chaos in the best possible way. Wrapping paper flew. Lily shrieked with delight over a new art set, a book about stars and a stuffed penguin that she immediately introduced to Cinnamon as his new best friend. Nathan opened the sweater Evelyn had bought him, soft gray wool that was nicer than anything he had owned in years, and pretended not to notice when she wiped her eyes at his genuine surprise. And then Lily presented Evelyn with a small box wrapped in paper she'd decorated herself, covered in hand-drawn snowflakes and hearts. I made this for you. Daddy helped a little, but mostly I did it myself. Evelyn opened the box carefully, treating the child's wrapping like precious artwork. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a bracelet made of beads. Most were simple wooden spheres painted blue and white, but in the center hung a small charm, a silver snowflake that matched the one around Evelyn's neck. "Daddy found the charm at a store." Lily's voice was suddenly shy. "I picked the beads. Blue because that's the color of your eyes when you're happy, and white because of the snow when we met." Evelyn couldn't speak. She sat there holding the bracelet, tears streaming down her face, completely undone by a 7-year-old's gift. "Do you not like it?" Lily's voice wobbled with sudden worry. "I love it." Evelyn pulled the girl into a fierce hug. "I love it more than anything anyone has ever given me. I'm going to wear it every single day, even to work, especially to work, so everyone can see how lucky I am." Lily beamed and helped Evelyn clasp the bracelet around her wrist. The silver snowflake caught the light twin to the one at her throat, and Evelyn thought about Sophie, about how her sister would have loved this moment, this child, this unexpected gift of belonging. After the presents were opened and the wrapping paper collected, they made breakfast together. Pancakes shaped like snowmen because Lily insisted, with chocolate chip buttons and strawberry slice scarves. Nathan burned 2 batches before getting it right, and Evelyn laughed at his cursing, and Lily declared it the best Christmas breakfast ever, even though the pancakes were slightly lopsided. They ate at the small kitchen table, squeezed together on chairs that weren't quite big enough, bumping elbows and stealing bites from each other's plates. Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding to the accumulation from the night before, sealing them inside their warm bubble of happiness. It was after breakfast, while Lily was occupied introducing her new penguin to the rest of her stuffed animal collection, that Nathan excused himself to the bedroom. He'd been putting this off, avoiding it with the practiced skill of someone who had learned to sidestep pain. But it was Christmas. It was the 3rd anniversary, and there was something he needed to do. In the closet on the top shelf, behind boxes of old tax returns and winter clothes they never wore, was a plastic container labeled Rachel Personal. He hadn't opened it since the weeks after her death, when he'd sorted through her belongings with numb efficiency, keeping some things, donating others, unable to process any of it properly. He pulled the container down and sat on the edge of the bed. His hands were shaking as he removed the lid. Inside were the small treasures of a life cut short. Rachel's nursing school diploma, a stack of photographs from their wedding, the hospital bracelet from Lily's birth, a journal with a worn leather cover that Rachel had written in every night before bed, and at the bottom an envelope he didn't remember seeing before. It was sealed. His name was written on the front in Rachel's handwriting. Nathan stared at it for a long moment, his heart pounding. Had she written this before she died? Some premonition, some preparation for the worst? Or was it something mundane, a note she'd tucked away and forgotten? He opened it with trembling fingers. "My darling Nathan, if you're reading this, something has happened and I'm not there anymore. I hope that's not true. I hope I'm sitting right next to you, laughing at how dramatic I was, making you promise to burn this letter and never speak of it again. But if I'm not, if the worst has happened, then there are things I need you to know. First, I love you. I have loved you since you walked into my ER with a broken rib and a terrible attitude, complaining about everything while secretly being terrified. I saw through you immediately. I saw the good man hiding behind the grumpiness, and I decided right then that I was going to marry you. You never stood a chance. Second, Lily is the best thing we ever did. She's magic, Nathan. She sees the world the way I always wished I could, full of wonder and possibility and invisible connections. Take care of her, but also let her take care of you. She's stronger than she looks. She gets that from her mother. Third, and this is the hard one, don't close yourself off. I know you. I know that if I'm gone, your first instinct will be to build walls and hide behind them. You'll tell yourself that loving once was enough, that you can't risk that kind of pain again, that Lily is all you need. And maybe that will be true for a while. Maybe you'll need time to grieve, time to heal, time to remember how to breathe without me. But Nathan, my love, you have so much left to give. Your heart is too big to stay locked away forever. And Lily needs to see you happy. She needs to learn that love is worth the risk, that opening yourself up is braver than staying safe, that life is meant to be lived fully even when it hurts. So here's what I'm asking, and I know it's a lot, and I know it might take years before you're ready to hear it. When someone comes along who makes you feel alive again, let her in. Don't compare her to me. Don't hold her to impossible standards. Don't push her away because you're afraid. Just let her in and let her love you and let yourself love her back. She won't be me. She shouldn't be me. She'll be her own person with her own gifts. And if Lily loves her, that's how you'll know she's right. Because our daughter sees things. She always has. Trust her. I'm not asking you to forget me. I'm asking you to honor me by living. Really living. The kind of living that involves risk and vulnerability and the possibility of being hurt. Because that's what I would want for you. That's what I've always wanted. I love you forever, Nathan Cole. In this life and whatever comes after. Take care of our girl and take care of yourself. All my love across all the distances. Rachel. Nathan sat on the bed with the letter in his hands and wept. He wept for Rachel, for the future they'd lost, for all the years she would miss. He wept for himself, for the guilt he'd carried about wanting to move on, for the fear that had almost cost him Evelyn. And he wept with relief, with gratitude, with the overwhelming sense that Rachel was still there somehow, still looking out for him, still giving him permission to be happy. He didn't know how long he sat there, long enough for the tears to slow, long enough to read the letter twice more, long enough for a soft knock to sound at the bedroom door. Nathan, Evelyn's voice was concerned. Is everything okay? He wiped his face and stood crossing to open the door. Evelyn took one look at him and her expression shifted from concern to alarm. What happened? What's wrong? Nathan handed her the letter. She read it standing in the doorway, her face moving through a dozen emotions as she absorbed Rachel's words. When she finished, she looked up at him with tears of her own. She knew. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. She knew you'd need permission. She knew everything. Nathan pulled her into his arms. She always knew everything. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, the letter pressed between them like a bridge across time. Nathan thought about all the ways he'd tried to protect himself, all the walls he'd built, all the times he'd almost turned away from the possibility of happiness. And he thought about Rachel, who had seen all of that coming, who had written a letter just in case, who had loved him enough to set him free. I want you to meet her. The words came out before he'd fully formed the thought. I want to take you to her grave. I want to introduce you properly. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. Are you sure? Rachel asked me to find someone, to let someone in. I think she'd want to know that I finally listened. They bundled up and drove to the cemetery, Nathan and Evelyn in the front seats, Lily in the back with Cinnamon and her new penguin. The roads were mostly clear, plowed overnight by crews working through the holiday, and the snow lay thick and white over the headstones, turning the graveyard into something almost beautiful. Rachel's grave was in a corner near a stand of bare maple trees. Nathan had chosen the spot because Rachel had loved trees, loved the way they changed with the seasons, loved watching the leaves turn every autumn. In spring, the maples would bloom with red flowers, and in summer they would provide shade, and in fall they would put on a show of color that Rachel would have photographed obsessively. They approached through ankle-deep snow, Lily leading the way with the certainty of a child who had made this pilgrimage many times before. Hi, Mommy. Lily's voice was conversational, unself-conscious. Merry Christmas. I brought Evelyn to meet you. She's Daddy's special friend. I told you about her to remember when I came with Daddy last month. Nathan hung back, watching his daughter talk to the headstone as if Rachel might answer. Evelyn stood beside him, her hand in his, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. Evelyn's really nice, Mommy. She's not as good at making pancakes as you were, but she's learning. And she helped me make paper snowflakes, and she found me when I got lost in the storm, and she makes Daddy smile. You said you wanted Daddy to smile again, so I think you'd like her. Lily turned and gestured for Evelyn to come closer. Evelyn looked at Nathan uncertain, and he nodded. She stepped forward, stopping beside Lily, looking down at the headstone with its simple inscription, Rachel Marie Cole, beloved wife and mother, her light lives on. Hello, Rachel. Evelyn's voice was soft but steady. I wish I could have known you. Everyone speaks about you with such love. Your husband, your daughter, everyone who remembers you. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace you. No one could, but I promise that I'll take care of them. Nathan and Lily, I'll do my best to make them happy. And I'll make sure Lily knows about you, knows your stories, knows how much you loved her. She's an incredible child. You must be so proud." She fell silent, and the three of them stood there in the snow, united by love for a woman who was gone, but somehow still present. It was Lily who broke the moment, tugging at Evelyn's sleeve. "I have to tell you something. A secret." Evelyn knelt down to Lily's level. "What kind of secret?" Lily glanced at her father, then back at Evelyn. "When I was lost in the storm the night we met, I heard Mommy's voice." Nathan felt something cold run down his spine. He'd known this, of course. Lily had mentioned it that night, but hearing her repeat it here at Rachel's grave gave it a new weight. "I was really scared," Lily continued. "The snow was so cold and I couldn't see anything, and I thought I was going to be lost forever. And then I heard Mommy. She said, 'Don't be scared, baby. Someone's coming to find you. Just stay where you are.' And then a little while later you came." Evelyn's face had gone pale. "You heard your mother's voice. Clear as anything, like she was standing right next to me." Lily's blue eyes were ancient and certain. "That's how I knew you were special, because Mommy sent you. She sent you to find me in the storm, and she sent you to find us after, to find all of us." Nathan didn't know what to believe. He was a practical man, not prone to mystical thinking. But he'd learned over the past 3 years that there were things in the world that couldn't be explained, connections that transcended logic, love that didn't end just because someone stopped breathing. "Maybe she did." His voice came out rough. "Maybe your mom has been watching out for us this whole time." Lily nodded solemnly. "She has. She told me she would before she went to heaven. She said she'd always be there even when I couldn't see her, and she was right." They stayed at the cemetery for a while longer, Lily chatting to her mother about Christmas presents and new friends and all the things that had happened since her last visit. Then the cold became too much, and they trudged back to the car, brushing snow from their coat's breath, coming in white clouds. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the P's seat, exhausted by the emotional morning. Nathan reached across and took Evelyn's hand. "Thank you for coming, for understanding, for all of it. Thank you for letting me in." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "I know how hard that must have been." Rachel made it easier. He thought about the letter, about the gift his wife had given him from beyond the grave. She made everything easier. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a warm blur. They watched movies on the couch, all three of them, under blankets, Lily wedged between Nathan and Evelyn, like she belonged there. They ate leftover cookies for dinner because no one felt like cooking. They played board games that Lily won because the adults weren't really trying, and then they played more board games where the adults did try, and Lily still won because she was ruthless at strategy. When bedtime came, Lily insisted that Evelyn be the one to tuck her in. "Tell me a story. Not one from a book, a real story." Evelyn sat on the edge of Lily's bed, searching for the right tale. "Did I ever tell you about my sister Sophie?" Lily shook her head, clutching cinnamon. "Sophie was the bravest person I ever knew. She wasn't brave the way people in movies are brave, with swords and battles and dramatic speeches. She was brave in smaller ways. She was brave enough to believe in magic when everyone else had stopped. She was brave enough to see the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. And she was brave enough to love with her whole heart, even though she knew that love can hurt." Lily listened with wide eyes. "What happened to her?" "She died a long time ago in an accident." Evelyn's voice was steady, but her hand found the snowflake at her throat. "But here's the thing I've learned, Lily. People who love us don't really leave. They stay in our hearts, in our memories, in the way we see the world. Your mom is still with you because you carry her inside you. And Sophie is still with me because I carry her inside me. And as long as we remember them, as long as we keep loving them, they're never really gone." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she reached up and touched Evelyn's necklace. "Sophie gave you this, yes. And you wear it every day. Every single day." Lily nodded, satisfied. "That's good. That's how she knows you still love her." Evelyn bent and kissed Lily's forehead. "You're very wise for 7 years old." "Daddy says I'm an old soul. I don't know what that means, but I think it's good." "It's very good. It means you understand things that most people take a lifetime to learn." Lily yawned, her eyes growing heavy. "Evelyn, will you be here tomorrow?" "Yes." "And the day after?" "Yes." "And forever." Evelyn looked at the small face on the pillow, at the blue eyes that were so like her mother's, at the trust that she'd somehow been deemed worthy of receiving. Yes, Lily, forever. The child smiled and closed her eyes, and within moments she was asleep. Evelyn sat there for a while, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of the promise she'd just made. Forever was a long time. Forever was terrifying. But looking at this child, thinking about the man waiting in the living room, she knew that forever was exactly what she wanted. She found Nathan on the couch staring at the snowflake-covered windows, lost in thought. She's asleep. He looked up and smiled. Thank you for everything today, for going to the cemetery, for the story, for being here. It means more than I can say. Evelyn sat beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. I want to stay. Tonight, tomorrow, all the nights after. She took a breath. I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slow. But life is short, Nathan. We both know that better than anyone. And I don't want to waste any more time being careful when I could be being happy. Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious. Are you sure? Because once Lily gets attached, once I get attached to even more than I already am, there's no going back. We'll be all in, and if it falls apart, it won't. Evelyn took his face in her hands. I'm not going anywhere. I've spent 3 years running from anything that might hurt me, and all I got was a beautiful apartment and a successful career and a loneliness so deep I thought I'd drown in it. I'm done running. I want to build something. With you, with Lily. Something real and messy and imperfect and ours. Nathan's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that this was too good to be true. He found none. Okay. The word was simple, but it held the weight of everything. Okay, let's build something. He kissed her then properly for the first time since the storm. Not the careful, tentative touches they'd shared before, but something deeper. Something that sealed the promise they were making to each other. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and the paper snowflakes swayed in the warm air rising from the heaters, and somewhere a church bell rang midnight, marking the end of Christmas Day. 1 year later, they stood in the same apartment, but everything was different. The windows were covered with paper snowflakes again, but now there were 3 sets of handwriting, visible in the careful cuts and folds. Nathan's were still lopsided. Lily's had grown more intricate with practice. And Evelyn's had improved dramatically, though she still claimed they had character rather than perfection. The apartment itself had changed too. Evelyn had moved in 6 months after that first Christmas, her boxes mixing with Nathan's until it was impossible to tell where one life ended and the other began. Her suits hung in the closet next to his work jackets. Her coffee mug sat beside his on the shelf. And on the mantel next to the photograph of Rachel was a new picture: Nathan, Evelyn, and Lily at the beach last summer, all of them laughing at something Lily had said, frozen in a moment of pure joy. Derek Morrison had been quietly removed from Morrison and Associates in February after Evelyn's meeting with his father revealed the full extent of his inappropriate behavior. The last she'd heard, he'd taken a position at a smaller firm in another city, his fall from grace complete. She rarely thought about him anymore. He'd been a villain in a story that had ended, and she had better things to focus on. Tonight was Christmas Eve, and they were making cookies together in the kitchen. Lily stood on her step stool, carefully pressing shapes into the dough, while Nathan supervised the oven with the wariness of a man who had learned from his mistakes. Evelyn was mixing frosting her bracelet with the snowflake charm, catching the light every time she moved. The first batch is ready. Nathan pulled the tray from the oven with a flourish. And look, not burned. It's a Christmas miracle. Evelyn grinned at him. Your confidence in me is overwhelming. Lily grabbed a still warm cookie and took a bite. These are perfect, Daddy. Almost as good as the ones Mom used to make. Nathan paused, surprised by the casual reference. Lily had grown easier talking about Rachel over the past year, integrating her mother's memory into their daily life, rather than treating it as something sacred and separate. It was healthy, the therapist had said. It was exactly what Rachel would have wanted. Almost, Nathan pretended to be offended. I'll have you know I've been practicing. Practice is good, Lily nodded sagely. That's what Mom always said. That's how you get better at things. The evening continued, full of sugar and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family life. They decorated the tree, arguing over the placement of ornaments. They watched the same Christmas movie they had watched last year and would probably watch every year from now on. They made hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. And at midnight, when Christmas Day officially arrived, They gathered by the window to look at the snow falling over Chicago. Make a wish. Lily had her face pressed against the glass. One snowflake for each of us. That's 3 wishes. Nathan looked at Evelyn. She looked back at him. And in that look was everything they'd built together, everything they'd survived, everything they still had ahead of them. I don't need to wish for anything. Nathan's voice was soft. I already have everything I ever wanted. Me too. Evelyn's hand found his. Me too. Lily turned from the window, her expression knowing beyond her years. You're both being mushy again. Get used to it, kid. Nathan scooped his daughter up with one arm, pulling Evelyn close with the other. This is your life now. They stood there, the 3 of them, silhouetted against the falling snow and the paper snowflakes in the window. Outside, the world was cold and dark and uncertain, full of all the dangers and sorrows that life inevitably brings. But inside this small apartment, in this warm circle of arms and hearts, there was only love. Rachel's paper snowflakes from years past hung among the new ones, a tangible reminder that the dead are never truly gone. Sophie's necklace gleamed at Evelyn's throat, carrying its own weight of memory and meaning. And Cinnamon watched from his place on the couch button, eyes reflecting the Christmas lights, guardian of a family that had been broken and healed and broken and healed again. Because that's what families do. They break and they heal. They lose and they find. They grieve and they love. And if they're lucky, if they're brave enough to let people in despite the fear, they discover that the cracks where the light gets through are also the cracks where the love gets in. Nathan Cole had learned that lesson the hard way. So had Evelyn Harper. But standing here now with his daughter in his arms and his partner at his side and the snow falling like angel wishes outside the window, he understood that the hard way was sometimes the only way. And it was worth it. Every moment of pain, every night of loneliness, every fear he'd had to overcome. It was all worth it because it had led him here. Home. Merry Christmas. Lily yawned against his shoulder. I love you both. We love you too, sweetheart. Nathan kissed her forehead. More than all the snowflakes in all the storms. That's a lot of snowflakes. Yes, it is. Evelyn leaned her head against Nathan's shoulder, watching the snow fall, feeling the warmth of the family she'd found when she'd stopped looking. She thought about Sophie, about Rachel, about all the people they'd lost and all the people they'd become. The 2 broken pieces had become one whole thing, just as Lily had predicted. Not perfect, not without cracks, but whole nonetheless. And in the end, that was the only miracle that mattered.